Australians, and in fact, people around the world, are waking up to the fundamental change that has happened to the Australian nation through these so-called hate speech laws that have been rushed through Parliament. These laws are simply a Trojan horse, an attack on free speech. Of course, no one wants to see true hate speech. We want to stamp out attacks on any type of religious group. But these laws go much, much further. As I said, they are simply a Trojan horse to suppress free speech in this nation. Under this new law, it doesn't matter if you are making your comments on a political issue in good faith. The good faith defence has been taken out of the law. So if you are engaging in debate about political policy, about failures of government, failures of bureaucracy, failures of our economy, if you are engaging in debate in those subjects, and even if you do so in good faith, you can still be arrested and you can still face up to 7 years in jail under the provisions of these laws. Now, let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about, because the line now of what is free speech and what is unlawful speech that will find you arrested and imprisoned for up to 7 years in this country is very grey. It is the ambiguity of these laws that become the suppression of free speech. Here's a couple of examples. Now, let's just say you make the political comment that all illegal migrants should be deported. Fair enough. That is a debate that we should be having in our society. But under these new laws, you could be up to 7 years in jail for saying that. Let's just go through the provisions of the laws and I'll show you how. Now, firstly, Section 80.2BA is the law against threatening force or violence against groups. Now remember, it's not just threatening violence. They've extended it to include threatening of force. So if you say all illegal migrants should be deported, deportation involves the use of force. So you fall foul of paragraph 1 because you are threatening to use force. Deportation. Now the second part of this act is where it is really dangerous. It is not just about targeting groups distinguished by race, religion, sex, so on. It's about also targeting groups based on political opinion. This should not be in this legislation. Fair enough, you might want to protect, of course we want to protect religious groups and religious freedom. But do we really want to have these laws where a protected group are those defined by their political opinion? So a group distinguished by their political opinion could include a group that believe in open borders and therefore they don't believe in deportation. That would be a group distinguished by their political opinion. Now, if a so-called reasonable member of that group that believes in open borders fears that the threat of deportation of migrants might be carried out, and if an argument is made under Section D of this Act that the threat, if carried out, would threaten the peace, good order and good government of the Commonwealth, whatever that means or however the courts could interpret that, you are guilty of an offence that will put you in jail for 7 years. So this is why this act, this legislation, this new act of Parliament is so dangerous. Simply saying illegal migrants should be deported could wind you up in jail for 7 years. And let me give you another example of how dangerous and how bad this law is. There's Section 80.2BC, which is advocating damage or destruction to real property or a motor vehicle. So let's just say, for example, I say something like in a political debate, wind turbines are a scam, they're an environmental and economic blight upon the country, and those wind turbines should be torn down. Well, firstly, I fall foul of Section 1 of this Act because I'm advocating or causing the damage or the destruction of real property. I'm calling for a wind turbine to be torn down. So there we are. So I've fallen foul of that provision. Now, secondly, it goes on, The first person does so because the first person's belief is that, and we go down here to paragraph 2. The real property is owned or occupied in whole or by part by one or more members of the group, in brackets, the targeted group. So if I'm calling for destruction of a house of worship, fair enough, that should have some consequences. But I'm calling for destruction of these destructive wind turbines. And if we go down to point D, it says the targeted group is distinguished by political opinion. So here there might be a group of people that are wholly committed to renewables and wholly love their wind turbines. They are a group distinguished by political opinion. And if a member of that group fears that my call to tear down these wind turbines would go ahead, I'm guilty of an offence and I'm up to 7 years imprisonment. This is just completely absurd. It is a great deterrent to free speech. And then we may want to consider how easily this will allow certain groups to label hate speech and call things hate speech. One of the greatest speeches of the last century was Ronald Reagan. Just remember, who can remember this one, where he called for Mr. Gorbachev to tear down this wall.
We welcome change and openness, for we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Well, I would suggest that Mr. Reagan, if he said this in Australia today, would face 7 years imprisonment, go through the provisions of the Act. Mr. Reagan, by calling for the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, he's there advocating to cause damage or destruction of real property. That's paragraph 1. And the group that owns that wall, we go down to section D, well, the targeted group is distinguished by political opinion. Yes, hardcore communists that believe that the Berlin Wall was necessary, they are certainly a group distinguished by political opinion. Right? And they're the owners of the Berlin Wall. So therefore, if it could be argued at all that the damage, destruction, if it were to occur, would threaten the peace, good order and Commonwealth and good government of the Commonwealth of Australia. Well, tearing down a wall for political purposes, who knows how a court would interpret that. So we could find that that famous speech of the US President Ronald Reagan under these new laws would be classified as hate speech. That is the great absurdity of these laws. So it wouldn't surprise me if these laws coming in place in Australia and this fundamental change, that the US issues a travel warning for American citizens travelling to Australia. Because there are now things that you could say that you are completely free to say in the USA because of the US First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech, which if you said in Australia, an American said in Australia, they could find themselves arrested and imprisoned in an Australian jail for 7 years. So Americans coming out here on speaking to us on current political issues like Tucker Carlson or Dr. Peter McCullough or many others that have come to Australia for speaking to us, they will need to be very careful in engaging in political debate, because they could say things completely and utterly which would be free to say in the USA that will likely fall foul of these new Australian laws, and they could find themselves ending up in an Australian prison. These are very bad laws. They go way too far. They lower the bar on what is so-called hate speech, which is just normal political speech in this country. I think we really need to consider where we are heading in Australia. Just take also today those comments of Dana White from the UFC as a wake-up call that we're pussies. We were once known as a free, vigorous, outgoing country of free people. Sadly, that is no longer the Australia that we are living in.
Listen, for a place that is so tough and the people, everything on land and the water can kill you. You have the biggest pussies I've ever seen in the media in my life. I saw a story where a guy was like, I saw Dana do a podcast with the Premier and it physically made me sick. Holy you guys have to have the biggest pussies of all time in the media here. Just for the record, but go ahead, what's the question?
The question is, does anyone in the government at all go, please not Strickland, or does that ever get back to you at all?
I do that. Are you kidding me? I do that. It is what it is. You know my stance on this, you know. We're going to take guys that, and girls, that say a lot of things and do a lot of things. I'm a big believer in free speech. And, you know, it probably seems worse when you come here because your media are such weak human beings. I thought we had weak media. You guys win hands down.